Hey guys, so today's video in the Armor Stacker for Dummies is going to be all about Armor Stacker scaling. So we're going to go over damage and defense, what stats are important, how do I scale my damage or defense, and kind of go into a few of the important points for each one of those topics. So for damage, we do have a few things, and you can see on the screen I did make this picture here. So on the left we have damage, and on the right we have defense, and you notice that a few of the, points you could say are similar. So in damage we have aura effect, flasks, and flask effect. We have gem levels, and you can see those exact same things are also in the defense category. So basically these three things are both going to affect your damage and your defense, right? So really, when you're building your armor stacker, these are sort of the things that you do want to prioritize, right? Because it's going to give you the best bang for your buck, you could say. You scale your aura effect gives you damage, it also gives you defense, and a lot of other good effects, right? Same thing with flask and flask effect, right? So flasks will give you more damage from the more armor or whatever, onslaught and all that kind of stuff, right? And then also having more armor is also going to give you more defense, right? For fizz damage reduction, or if you're playing a build with armor applies to elemental damage, like say Chieftain, Juggernaut, or playing with the charms in Affliction League, or playing a Transcendence build, then your armor is also going to apply to your elemental damage taken and give you more defense. Gem levels, this is something that a lot of new players, make mistakes on. This is they make their build and they ask me, why is my damage so low? Why do I only have 200k, 300k armor? And probably like 90% of the time I go look at the POB and they're running like level 15 gems. So yeah, gem levels are very important. A great way to increase your damage and your defense is by getting a lot of gem levels. Okay, so there's a couple other things that we'll go over, but other than that, there's a few other more multipliers. There's like stuff like, your support gems, your attack speed. These things are all great too. And then for defense, we have armor applies to elemental damage. We have physical damage taken as. That's something we'll go into a little bit more later. And then there's also block, energy shield, regen, ES on hit, leech, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's jump into the video. Okay, so why aura scaling? Why is aura scaling so good? Well, first of all, we are running quite a few auras, and increasing our aura effect is going to, make those auras better, basically, right? So what do we get from increasing our aura effect? So first of all, we scale our increased damage from our armor and the replicate dream feather, right? So if you remember from the first video, there is like the holy trinity of damage, right? In most of these kind of RPG kind of games, you have your flat, increased, more. And aura effect is going to increase our evasion in our armor, and then that's going to get converted, or not converted, but that basically is our increased damage because of the replica dream feather sword. And then it also scales our flat damage from the wrath and smite. So we're basically scaling 2 points of the damage pyramid, or whatever you want to call it, right? So we're getting 2 of those scaling points just from aura effect, which is pretty great, right? We also scale attack speed from haste and or necromancer. So if you're playing Scion, aura effect does affect the necromancer aura that you get from your ascendancy, right? So that is giving you attack speed. It also does scale energy shield from discipline, right? So you get more energy shield from your discipline aura, and probably most of your energy shield is going to be coming from this discipline aura. So if you want to get a lot of energy shield, get a lot of aura effect and gem levels on your discipline. It also scales our accuracy and crit. So we pretty much don't have any accuracy except the accuracy you get from dex and a little bit on the sword. And the way you get your accuracy is just from precision, right? So precision and aura effect is enough to actually cap your hit chance. And then crit, it's not super important, but if you're playing with elemental overload, you do need to crit once in a while. So precision does give you some crit, which is kind of nice. Right, we also scale our regen. So regen, if you're running vitality, it's really good because that's where you're going to get your life regen or your ES regen. So basically, aura effect just does everything you want, right? It scales every part of the build that you would want. So as a top priority, you do want to look into scaling as much aura effect as you can. Alright, so what auras do I prioritize? So if you do have a choice to increase a certain aura, which you can do with you can do this with corruption implicits for specific auras, or synth implicits and all this kind of stuff, but what would be the order that I would prioritize them? And this is just what I would do for me: Grace, Determination, Wrath, Discipline. And then there's some other ones, right? So if you do have a choice to increase a aura's gem levels, or increase its aura effect, like say you have a +2 to gem level pair of gloves, right? Well, what auras do you want to put in there? Well, aside from your purity, which is kind of something else we'll get into later on, it would be Grace, Determination, Wrath, Discipline. I guess obviously Grace does go in the March of Legion, so it doesn't really apply to a +2 pair of gloves, but I think you get the idea, right? If you can increase one of these gems levels or aura effect, then this is the order that I would do it in. Okay, so how do I get more aura effect? Alright, so let's go into POB real quick and let's look at the passive tree. So there's a few aura effect clusters on the passive tree. So there's one over here. There is this sovereignty. Okay. Right, so we got that one. And then let's just take this out real quick. Okay, then there's leadership, this area here. Then we have the influence area here. And then there is champion of the cause over here. And then we have charisma. So those are the aura effect say masteries or areas on the tree you can get. And Scion is in a good spot to actually pick up all of them. You can pick all of these auras and then anoint charisma, and you basically have every single aura effect node on the tree. For Marauder or champion, leadership, this one here and this thing here, that's 6, so that's 12% aura effect. This is probably not something that they're going to be able to take, just because it's too far out of the way. Like a lot of Marauders can come up here and then pick up this one here, influence, but probably none of them are going to be able to grab the leadership area. So that is something to note, but this is all of the aura effect you can get on the tree, and getting this aura effect should be a top priority. Okay, after that we have small cluster jewels. So aside from everything you can grab on the passive tree, the next best way to get your aura effect is going to be with these small clusters. It's a small cluster jewel with added small passives, grant 6% increase mana reservation efficiency of skills, and when they're item level 68 and above, they can roll this introspection node. So introspection grants you auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you. So this is only for you. So if you are planning to actually do some group content and you're like, well, I'm an armor stacker, I've got tons of auras and I have all this aura effect, but reality is pretty much half of your aura effect is only affecting you. So I mean, it's still going to be okay, I guess, in a group, but it's something to note that this is only affecting you, this aura effect. Okay, so you can get most builds are going to run 3 voices. I think in some cases they'll grab 4, like pathing up to the left here and grabbing 4. But in most cases, what you see is only 3, so that's 9 introspections, and that's 90% increased aura effect from your small clusters. So if you're not using voices, you obviously do miss out on 3, and you only get 60% increased aura effect, but that still is quite a big amount, and is something you should definitely be prioritizing right after you get everything on the passive tree. Oh, there is also a mastery on the passive tree for auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you. So first priority, get the ones on the tree, and then after that we go for the small clusters, the large cluster into small cluster to grab the introspections. So when you're building your armor stacker, that's pretty much all you have to do to start off your core tree, right? You grab the aura effect nodes on the tree, and then you look, okay, so where is the cluster jewel slots? You put in the cluster jewels, you put in small clusters, and your tree is, it's pretty much done, right? So not really that hard to actually just build a armor stacker tree. Okay, another good way is with timeless jewels. So timeless jewels to really get in depth into these and how to find one and all that kind of stuff, I think it's better we make a different video all about timeless jewels, which we'll probably do eventually in the future. But in this one, we'll go over 2 jewels I like to use the most. So the first one is going to be a brutal restraint. So a brutal restraint will give you you can get up to 24% increased aura effect. Those are pretty rare, but they do exist. And then most common is a 16% aura effect. So the brutal restraint, it's going to give you on one of these nodes, right? It's going to have, you know, plus 8% aura effect, right? So depending on where you get your 8%, you can get 16 or 24 or only 8. And you can also roll some other cool stats like gain Alchemist Genius whenever you use a Flask, which gives you Flask effect, which is pretty good before you actually get a Mage Blood and that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so aside from that, the second one I like to use is going to be a Militant Faith. Militant Faith doesn't really give as much aura effect potentially than the Brutal Restraint, but one thing it does is, first of all, if you want to run Transcendence, then you need to use the Militant Faith because you get the Transcendence Keystone from the Militant Faith. So one other good thing about the Militant Faith is that you can roll additional effects on it that you get depending on the amount of devotion you have. So the one I have is 1% reduced mana cost of skills per 10 devotion and 1% increased effective non-curse auras per 10 devotion. So you can see over here I have 160 devotion, so that's 16% reduced mana cost of skills and another 16% increased aura effect. So very nice jewel overall, and definitely I don't know, I think this one is really nice because, especially for the reduced mana cost of skills, it basically allows you to run your Grace Aura Divine Blessing setup without any additional mana cost reduction on the passive tree or on jewels or your rings, right? So that's just the 2 ones that I like to use. There is some other ones that do give aura effect, but I'm not really too familiar with them. Alright, so Eldritch Implicits. So on your body armor, you can actually roll these implicits with the Eldritch currency. It's these red and the blue things. And the Searing Exarch one, when you roll it up to perfect, can roll 20% increased effective non-curse auras. So that's very nice. Then on the Eater of World side, you can roll an aura specific increase. So pretty nice overall. Very nice if you're using a rare chest to get these implicits. Okay, so then there is synth implicits. So synth implicits are mainly going to be on your helmet or on your rings. So you can get aura effect on your helmet. There's up to 15% on the helmet. I don't really have it on this one, but you can get those. They are pretty expensive. And then you can also get synthesized rings like this one here. So you can get Grace aura effect, Determination aura effect, or Discipline or Wrath and all that kind of stuff. So rings, and then you can also get it on, I think that's the only other synth one, maybe on, I don't think on the amulet, but yeah. So mainly just the rings and the helmet. Okay, after that, finally we do have corruption implicit, so you can get aura specific corruptions on your armors and this kind of stuff, and mainly going to be on your rings and on your belt. And I guess the amulet can also roll it too. I don't really have examples right here, but there are specifics like Grace, Determination, Wrath, Discipline, that kind of stuff, which you can get on your rings. So if you're using Original Sin, you can go and corrupt a bunch of these, or use locks and corrupt them, or Mage Blood to take it into the temple and get a double corruption for like Grace, Determination, and have a really good time with that. Alright, so one question I got asked before was, what kind of breakpoints are there? What's something that's important to look out for your aura scaling and all this kind of stuff? And honestly, there's only really 2 things for auras that I really look for. So the 2 things that I can think of that I really actually care about is the purity, your purity scaling. So purity of ice, purity of fire. This is used to get to 90 all res, so this is pretty important. And then after that, one other interesting one is the Necromancer aura that Scion gets from its Ascendancy. And then of course there are the other auras. I'll have a few examples of what what benefits you get from gem levels and that kind of stuff. But in general, I really don't actually even care about these. I don't really even look. Actually, today is probably the first time I actually looked up what what increased gem levels actually do to some of these auras, right? I'd never even really cared about them. I just look in PLB. Whenever I get an aura effect increase or a gem level increase, I look in PLB, I see the number go up, and I'm like, okay, great. But the ones that you really do need to keep track of is probably going to be this purity scaling, because that's going to help you to get to 90 auras. So let's go over that first. Alright, so purity scaling and getting to 90 all resistance. So in order to get to 90 all res, so I've added 3 examples here, and I don't really know if these setups are going to be used, but I thought I'd just add them in here anyway. So first of all, you do need to have a level 23 purity in all of these examples. So the difference in a level 21 purity and a level 23 purity is that a level 21 purity of fire, for example, or it's the same for ice or lightning, but it's going to give you +4 maximum resistance. And a level 23 is when that actually turns into a 5. So that does make a big difference in when you're trying to actually get to 90 auras by scaling that number with your aura effect. Okay, so first of all, we need a level 23 purity. So the first example up here on the top left is going to be if you're running 3 purities, so you're running purity of ice, fire, and lightning, you're going to need 200% increased aura effect, or if you look in PLB in the calc section, it's going to say ×3. But I think the default it starts off with is ×1. So basically, yeah, 200% increased gets you to 90 auras, right? Because 5 times 200, then you get the 15 plus 15 res, right? So if you're using melding and just 1 purity, right, then you're going to need 280% increased aura effect to actually get to 90 all res. So you're using melding with a level 23 purity, 280% increased aura effect. Now that is quite a bit to achieve, and it is pretty hard to do in League. But one thing that you can do, and this is the setup I recommend the most, is to use Aegis, Aegis Aurora, and melding. So Aegis Aurora gives you +5 to cold res, so it does make actually hitting the 90 all res fairly simple if you use purity of ice. So with Aegis and melding, a level 23 purity of ice, all you need is 180% increased aura effect, or times 2.8 aura effect mod in PLB, and that'll give you 90 all res. Alright, so Necromancer. So Necromancer aura on Scion, this is like for Scion only, or if you play a Necromancer armor stacker. Basically, there is this Ascendancy that says auras from your skills grant 2% increased attack and cast speed. So this aura is very interesting, and a lot of people ask, well, why do you actually take this, right? They think, a lot of people think it's for like the offerings and that kind of stuff, but not really. I mean, you can use offerings if you really want to, but the main reason we want this Ascendancy is because of the 2% increased attack and cast speed. So this gets attached to your auras, basically. So yeah, and then it scales with aura effect. If you look below, you can see some examples. So with 150% increased aura effect, that 2% becomes 3%. And you got to remember that PoE rounds numbers down. So with 170% increased aura effect, you're going to get 3.4% increased attack and cast speed, but it gets rounded down to 3. Same thing with that 190% increased aura effect, it gets rounded down to 3. Right, so the breakpoints for this aura, you could say, are at the 50% mark. So 150, 200, 250, 300, 350. And you can see the numbers actually start going up. So pretty interesting. And if you are playing Scion, maybe you do want to look into this, actually get, to that 50% breakpoint. Another cool thing is that since it is attached to each one of your auras, aura-specific increases do actually work, right? So you can see in this picture here that one of my auras, this is my Grace aura by the way, is 7%, while all the other ones are 6. And the reason for that is I do have a Grace has increased aura effect implicit somewhere, or it's on my chest, I think, right? So that actually pushed my Grace effect, aura to 350% aura effect. So it did get, or no, 250 or times 3.5 or whatever. And that actually did push the 6% to a 7%. So kind of interesting too. Okay, so gem levels. So like we went over before, You know, gem levels are almost just as important as aura effect because that is the base number that's going to get multiplied by your aura effect. So whenever you can get a higher gem level, either by getting a level 21 gem corruption or putting that gem into an item that gives you plus levels to the item, or in the case of smite, if you're using a skill like Molten Strike or Lightning Strike, having it linked to an Empower and all this kind of stuff. Basically, the more gem levels you get, the more flat damage you get on your smite aura, and the more, say for your grace aura, the more it gives you more evasion and more flat. If you look at the difference between a level 20 gem and a level 34 gem, and I have it set to level 34 because that's currently the level of my grace aura right now, it's pretty much just double the value on the flat, and we get another, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% more evasion. So pretty big, since that number does get scaled by your aura effect. Same thing with the smite aura. So if you look at a level 34 smite, it's like, let's just say 500 flat on the top end, and you multiply that by 3, and then you're at, you know, 1500 flat lightning damage, which is pretty insane. Compared to if you only had level 20 smite, that would only be at 600 flat. So gem levels are very important. It's something you should prioritize whenever you can. Okay, so Flask and Flask effect. So same thing with the auras. These flasks, there is like the Basalt and Stibnite flask that give 20% more armor and evasion. And if you use a Mage Blood, you can get these increased effect prefixes, and using Kindling Orbs to enchant them up to 95%. So becomes the 20% becomes 39% more armor and evasion, which is pretty insane. And also, you know, Silver Flask gives you Onslaught, right? So they changed this so the Onslaught you get from your Flask also works with the Enkindling Orb and the Flask Prefect for increased effect. So instead of giving 20% increase in attack and cast speed, you get 39. So this also does increase the movement speed too, which is pretty cool. So after your auras, your aura effect scaling, the gem scaling, or I'd say maybe even before your gem scaling, getting Flasks and Flask effect is going to be a very big damage increase. So making sure you have very good suffixes, suffix rolls on your Flasks. Getting the Mage Blood is going to be a very big damage increase, first of all for consistency for your Flasks uptime, and then also you get to use this increased effect of your Flask, so basically just sort of doubles the effect of the Flask, which is pretty insane. Okay, so more multipliers. So after you've scaled your aura effect, you can't really scale it anymore, and say you have got your Flasks, right? You can't scale your Flasks anymore. You've pumped up the gem levels for your gems for as much as they can take. So what do you do next, right? So there's a couple of other things, right? There's more multipliers. So we have things like Berserk, you can use from the Calm Spirit, or if you have other ways to generate rage. There is increased damage taken for your target. So there's like stuff like Exposure, Curses, Doriani's Prototype, Original Sin, and Withered, and then Penetration. So these are all things that you can also get into your build to, because these are also more multipliers basically, right? So they are going to increase your damage by quite a bit. Projectile skills can use Sniper's Mark for increased damage taken. So this is actually one of the reasons why projectile skills are always going to do more damage than normal strike skills, like for example just Smite versus something like Molten Strike or Lightning Strike. The difference is that, well, first of all, Lightning Strike is a projectile, so we can use the Sniper's Mark for increased damage taken. So right off the bat, it's, that's gonna basically outclass any kind of strike skill, because you get that extra more multiplier, right? And then also you can go and get Point Blank, right? And Point Blank is another more damage multiplier, which is also another reason why projectile skills are just, they just outclass normal strike skills pretty much all the time, with the downside of, I guess you do have to use Smite as a buff tool, so it's one extra button, but in a lot of cases, these projectile skills can pretty much just double or triple the damage of a normal strike skill. So then I guess your other more multipliers are going to be from your support gems. So getting Awakened gems, getting max level corrupted Awakened gems, and that kind of stuff is also going to be a very big damage increase. Okay, so next, multiple hits. So stuff like Molten Strike or Lightning Strike, where you have projectiles that can return. So like Molten Strike, especially if you use Nimbus, then all of the returning projectiles basically are guaranteed hits. So this is a very big damage increase, like over, it's like 70% more damage pretty much, because the initial Molten Strike hits don't really actually all hit all the time, but the returning projectiles pretty much hit all the time, just because the way they return to you, right? So if you're standing on top of the boss, they're always going to return to you and hit the boss. And then with Lightning Strike 2, it's very easy to hit 2 times with projectiles, even with Nimbus, or in other cases, return projectiles is also a very good alternative for generating more hits. And more hits is nice, I guess, offensive-wise. It's very nice for clear. It's very nice also for defensive-wise. If you're running like a ES on hit or life gain on hit, Watcher's Eye, more hits equals more sustain, basically, right? Okay, so next, let's talk a little bit about some defense scaling. So first of all, we have Armor Applies to elemental damage taken. So you can get this from Jug Unbreakable, it's at 8%, or you can get it from Transcendence, from the Militant Faith. And also this league in Affliction, it's possible to get it on Charms, or that which was taken Jewel. So on Charms you can get 3%, you can have 3 of those, so that's 9. And then you can get another 3% on the Jewel, so you can get a total of 12%. Basically the way it works is it reduces elemental hit damage 2 times. First of all, you get damage reduction from resistances, and then you get that number after that gets reduced by your armor. And there, you know, there are other things like Fortify and all this kind of stuff that actually goes into the damage taken calculation, that if you're really interested in the actual raw numbers, I suggest you go look at the wiki for these kind of things and actually go, you know, get the actual formula and do all your research there. In this video, we're just going to give you a very kind of brief overview of this is kind of like how it works, right? So let's say, for example, we get hit by a 10,000 hit. And say we have 90 all res, right? That's going to be reduced by 90%, and then so that's what, 1,000 damage, right? And then after that, let's just say we have enough armor to actually reduce incoming physical damage by 90%. So that 1,000 number gets then reduced again by our armor by 90%. So it means from 10,000 hit, we only actually took 100 damage. And then of course there's other things, like say if you have Molten Shell. And then if you have Fortify, if you have other damage mitigation, then all that gets put into the calculation. And this 10,000 hit can actually just be reduced all the way down to like just 10 damage, basically. So that's kind of how powerful this Armor Applies to elemental damage taken is on Armor Stacker, just because of the amount of armor you have. And you have enough aura effect to mitigate the downsides of Transcendence, which is you get a lot of minus max res, right? So is probably the best way in the game, I would say, to reduce elemental hit damage taken is going to be with these, having a lot of armor and then a lot of Armor Applies to elemental damage. Okay, so is Transcendence worth it? Okay, so I get asked this quite a bit, and in Affliction League, it is actually possible for many classes to actually just get the Armor Applies to elemental damage taken. So if we look here on the left, I set up a kind of test POB. You can see on the very left, we have a 12% of Armor Applies to elemental damage taken config with 90 all res and about 5 million armor. So you can see our max Fizz and elemental hit is 271, which is pretty good. Now at Transcendence with 85 res, which is actually achievable this league in Affliction with the same stats and 85 res, you can see our max hit is 333k. So Transcendence still is actually quite a bit better in terms of taking a very big hit. And when you get to 90 all res with Transcendence, well, nothing really in the game can actually beat that. Basically, it's like the highest damage reduction from hits that you can do is with Transcendence. From what I've seen so far, nothing really can beat this in terms of max hit taken. So in this league, in Affliction, since, you know, Transcendence is very annoying to set up, there's a lot of things you have to do to actually get it working. I think for most players, you're not going to really need Transcendence to actually play the game. These Armor Applies to elemental damage taken charms is enough for EHP wise or max hit for pretty much anything in the game. So for most people, I would say go for the Armor Applies Elemental Damage taken charms, or play Chieftain or Juggernaut and do that, because it's pretty easy to do that and it works. It works very well. You don't have to worry about converting all your fizz taken to elemental and all those kind of annoying things that Transcendence has to do. But if you really want to make that build that just doesn't die to no matter what the game throws at you, then Transcendence is the way to go. And one thing to note is for Armor Applies Elemental Damage taken to actually become as good as Transcendence, well, you do need to get about double the amount of armor. So I looked at this same POB config, and if I increase the armor on the left-hand side, the 12% of armor applies to elemental damage to 10,000 armor, then the EHP on the max hit numbers were actually starting to become similar to the Transcendence at 85 all res. Of course, it didn't come close to the 90% res Transcendence, but it's something to note. And 5 billion armor is actually quite a bit to achieve in League. I think you are probably going to definitely need the double overcap armor, so the armor is increased by fire and then evasion is increased by cold. Probably going to need one of those to hit 5 million armor. And for, I think most builds are going to be close to about 3.5, maybe 4 million armor. And in that case, Transcendence is going to be way tankier than the 12% of armor applies elemental damage taken, because at lower armor values, Transcendence does give you a lot more benefit. Okay, so physical damage taken as. So one thing I got asked a few times actually is, well, why convert physical damage to another element when you have millions of armor? Isn't armor just enough, right? You have 90% physical damage reduction. And the answer is, well, no. It really depends on the content you're doing, and physical damage does hurt quite a lot in Path of Exile. Just armor is not going to save you in extreme content when there is physical damage that's increased by like map mods, or let's say like in Delve, and where monsters are, white monsters are hitting you for as much as like an uber boss explosion or like one-shot ability, right? And if that damage is physical, well, good luck mitigating that with only your armor. It's not going to work. The solution is basically to convert your physical damage to a different element. In combination with Armor Applies Elemental Damage taken, so either from the Chieftain, the Juggernaut Ascendancy, or with the Charms, or Transcendence, and then physical damage taken as conversion, you can reduce the physical damage you take 2 times. So like we went over before with the Armor Applies to Elemental Damage, works, right? So that damage reduction gets applied 2 times to elemental damage. So if we convert our physical damage into elemental, then that converted damage then gets reduced 2 times as well. So it gives you quite a big physical max hit taken, which is very nice. And then one other cool thing is, if you're playing a CI build, you can get some nodes on the passive tree or on helmets and this kind of stuff, or on shields as a corruption that says physical damage from hits taken as chaos. And since you're CI, you're immune to chaos, so basically just that damage gets like deleted from the game, right? It just doesn't happen. So basically it makes you really, really tanky for physical hits. And you can see in a lot of builds with a lot of fizz taken as chaos, the fizz max hit is often the highest number. Okay, so just to give you an example of how effective these kind of things are, is on the left we have a this is my current character with 90 all res, 3 million armor, and I've taken out all of the fizz conversion, and then I've taken out all of the armor applies, and you can see what the max hit is, basically about 86k. Now on the right hand side we have the same character with 84 all res, 3 million armor, with Transcendence, and yeah, 100% of physical damage taken as a mix of chaos and different other elemental types. And you can see the difference in the amount of damage this character can take once you have all of this set up with the Armor Applies to elemental damage taken from hits, and then physical damage from hits taken as either chaos or fire, lightning, or cold. You can see the difference is substantial, and basically this character just isn't dying to any kind of hit damage. So that's kind of the reason why a lot of people do convert their physical damage into different elements, because armor is just not, for most builds, armor isn't a very consistent way to mitigate big hits. For Armor Stacker, when you have millions of armor, maybe you still can, but it really isn't going to be enough in extreme content. So I'm talking extreme content is like Uber bosses, maybe the Valdos maps, the deep delve, you know, like 4K, 5K, 6K plus delve, that kind of stuff. Okay, so aside from the things we went over, which are going to increase your max hit taken, what can you do to increase your recovery? So increasing your recovery you can do by getting more block. So if you're using Aegis Aurora, you can get block, glancing blows, you can get spell block, Tempest Shield, and then with Aegis Aurora, every time you block, you basically get healed to full. So that's a very, very good way of sustain. You can get more energy shield, of course, right? And then you can get some energy shield regen. You can get ES on hit, and then you can get leech. And pretty much that's how you sustain your energy shield. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today. And if anything, if you learned anything from this video, the one thing you should remember is that if you don't know what to scale, then scale your R effect, right? If you've already scaled your R effect past the point that's possible for your character, then look into your flasks, flask effect, and then after that, you look into your gem levels, and then after that, go over the other more multipliers, like we went over with the support gems, and then other more multipliers, so like berserk, things like berserk, attack speed, and other increased damage taken multipliers. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching, and leave a comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or if I did make any kind of mistakes in this video, please let me know. But that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.